Welcome, young writers. It's another episode of the Young Writers blog. Today, we're going to be focusing on the next of the plot lines, the rags to riches storyline. Last time, we covered the overcoming the monster. Now, last time when we talked about overcoming the monster, it was probably the most ubiquitous storyline as present in fiction. This time, the rags to riches storyline is quite possibly the most common in non-fiction storytelling. This is a plotline that comes up a lot in documentaries, biographies, and based on a true story type fictions. It's overcoming the monster's distant and more down-to-earth cousin, where in this case the monster is poverty and overcoming it is not being impoverished anymore. And before I go over the specifics on how these plotlines work, it's important to note that sometimes the riches talked about in rags to riches isn't physical wealth. Sometimes it's becoming more sure about who you are as a person or becoming more mature or well-rounded as an individual. As such, this plotline also encompasses coming-of-age stories because they often go hand-in-hand with rags to riches storyline. How these stories begin is fairly simple. You start with the protagonist who is both unassuming and unimportant. And unlike most other plotlines, they're usually quite young. These protagonists rarely begin the story as adults, although the events of it usually gives them a deeper sense of responsibility and maturity and puts them on the path to adulthood. These child protagonists usually lack a visible marker of privilege. Most commonly, they're children who are extremely poor. Stories like Aladdin and Oliver Twist start with a street rat or an orphan boy surviving on theft or charity, respectively. Both of them representing the depths of poverty present in the society where they're set. In either case, the protagonist of a rags to riches story is exposed to a situation that allows them to overcome whatever obstacle is preventing them from achieving full participation in the society they're in. Whether it's Aladdin finding a magic lamp that allows him to wish away all of his problems for the moment, or it's Slumdog Millionaire participating and winning this game show. However, when this happens, these successes are usually incomplete. These stories rarely end with the protagonist attaining wealth, but rather focus on their ability to overcome the problems that wealth creates, with one notable exception that I'll talk about later. After becoming wealthy and important individuals, these protagonists quickly show their strength and their resolve. It's the strength of coming from humble or even desperate backgrounds. These protagonists challenge the wealthy elite that had let the world become so split between the rich and poor that it allowed such atrocities to continue without a care, usually in the process demonstrating that they deserve their wealth all along because they're both intelligent and compassionate. So the point of rags to riches storylines isn't specifically about attaining wealth. These stories are part of a society that romanticizes hard work and struggle, that insists that the underdog always has a chance to win even when the odds are stacked against them. It's the idea that a right and good person will rise above the obstacles placed before them and will inevitably receive the success that they deserve. And so unlike the previous plot line, Overcoming the Monster, these rags to riches storylines are much less common in fiction, except for sports stories, of which all of them follow this plot line. Almost every single story we tell about sports uses this plot line, if for no other reason than the fact that champion team continues to hold on to a championship is not exactly the most compelling storyline. Rather, the underdog team that has countless obstacles between them and success overcomes them anyways to rise to the first place is the easy story to tell. There's that's right there. It's so easy. And that's why this is a basic plot. They are very easy to write and obvious and very easy for audiences to connect with and understand. So one of the reasons these are less common in fictional stories is because nonfiction's rise to power has created these stories all over the place. I have few examples of fictional storytelling that use rags to riches, but that doesn't matter because nonfiction stories use plot as well. The way that you talk about real events is structured in a very specific and logical fashion that is exactly the same to the way a fictional storyteller will talk about the events in their made-up stories. The order in which you talk about information and the emphasis you place on certain events is a necessary consideration to do in nonfiction as much as it is in fiction. Understanding the rags to riches storyline is to understand one of the most basic nonfiction plots out there. It's the idea that with hard work and dedication you can overcome the obstacles towards your success. And I think one of the most interesting ways this is played out is in the way that we as a society conceptualize economic mobility. The rags to riches storyline is embedded in the idea of capitalism. It's the idea that a person can work their way out of poverty. It's the idea that dedication and good ideas can take a person from having nothing to having everything. That concept of economic mobility comes from somewhere. It comes from a storytelling history where it happens frequently that the hardworking underdog overcomes their disadvantages to rise to success because they were better than the established elites, because the people who had all the power had become disconnected with the realities of the world. And it takes this upstart who has a different perspective on the world to undermine the expectations that the wealthy elite had before. and revitalized society as a whole. This concept is very old, and we know this because our stories have been using it for as long as we've had stories. The original story for Aladdin is old. It's one of the oldest ones we have in existence, and yet it uses the same ideas of a hardworking and lucky poor person being able to rise to wealth and power. We see that story in Western civilization. It's in the way that we think about poverty. It's in the way that we think about equality. It's in the way that we think about opportunity and economics. So it's important to recognize how these stories are functioning and that they are constructed narratives, because these stories have an impact on our society. They change the way that we see the world and the way that we understand how it works. And so it's important to recognize these rags to riches storylines are constructed and deliberate narratives because they are story. Even in the realm of nonfiction, the writers have made choices on how to structure their story, on what to focus on, and what they believe to be the aspects of it. So when dealing with nonfiction, you have to remember it is not absolute truth. It is a way of presenting the truth to an audience. It is a particular perspective and way of understanding the truth. It is not the truth pure and simple, because the truth is rarely pure and never simple. Thank you everyone for joining me on this description of rags to riches storylines, their effects on storytelling as a whole, as well as their effect on culture. Join us next time for our storyline coverage of The Quest. Why did I cross my arms there? Join us next time for our coverage of the basic plot, The Quest. Make sure to subscribe to our channel and give us a like, and if you have any questions, leave a comment. For people in the Calgary area, check out the Long Lunch Quick Reads featuring Katie O'Brien. It's an opportunity to share lunch and poetry at the same time, which I can personally attest to is a great way to spend an afternoon. Attendance is free, but lunch is $10. Details here. Thank you everyone, and good night. Or good morning. I have no idea when you're watching this video. Surprise! Writers or activists. Oh.